Hey, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Security Repo Podcast. As always, I am your host, Dwayne, and very glad to have you back with us this week. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really does help us out as a channel, and share it with your friends. And if you don't like the show, please share it with your enemies. We just want everybody to be better at security, including, well, people that you might not even agree with. But we think everybody's got stuff to learn. In fact, this week I got a lot to learn because we have a guest with us that I'm excited to have to talk about OpenBao, among other things in security. This week we have with us Alex Scheel. He is a Staff Backend Engineer at GitLab and the chair of the OpenBao Technical Steering Committee. He's built a career on open source contributions, previously working at Keyfactor on Bouncy Castle, at HashiCorp on Vault, and also working at Canonical and Red Hat. You can find him under the nickname cipherboy most places, and in his free time, he likes to play the violin and taking photography out on trips. So, welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. So let's just dive right in. OpenBao. What is this, and why is it? How did it come into existence?
Yeah, so OpenBao is a fork of HashiCorp Vault. It was started by IBM under the LF Edge subproject. IBM Software ships a project called IBM Edge Application Manager, which they open sourced under the Open Horizon name, which was under LF Edge, hence why OpenBao is under LF Edge as well. They had been using Vault while it was open source to provide secrets for their edge application management platform. So you can connect IoT devices and edge sensors to databases and central stores of that information. And so they needed a way of securing all of that. And so they opted to use HashiCorp Vault. When Vault relicensed, they started the fork. And sometime later, I joined to see how the fork was doing. And with the subsequent acquisition by IBM of HashiCorp, they've kind of taken a step back, and that's allowed the community to continue under the Linux Foundation and keep going. So it's a secrets manager for people who aren't familiar with HashiCorp Vault. It's kind of, I guess, the version of password management, but not for humans, like you and I, but for applications and development teams. So not going to be the hip new TikTok anytime soon. You're not going to necessarily share it with your grandma, but it serves an important role in a lot of enterprise environments.
I mean, I think it's especially true now in the world of non-human identity. Has kind of exploded. That term is fairly new, but the concept has not been. Was 2022? The estimates were about 45, 50 to 1. Uh,
Mhm.
More recently, I've seen numbers over 100 to 1 ratios. So this is a troubling problem. The vaults are definitely a part of that overall solution. We love vaults around here. But I want to dig into that a little bit. One of the things you said, the change in licensing. Could you just give us a quick summary of like what actually happened there?
Sure. So in August of 2023, HashiCorp announced that it was relicensing all of its products, and commercial products. They were originally had open source counterparts under the Mozilla public license, which is a very copyleft liberal license based upon file level granularity of licensing. Um, Similar, I guess, to the GPL, but without quite as many viral effects. Um, the HashiCorp, announced, in their FAQ that they were relicensing to the business license, which was the one used by MariaDB. It's has a clause in there that says, you can use this for any purpose except to compete commercially with, the owner of this code, which is HashiCorp. And at the time, there was this big not a dispute, but a big hubbub around OpenTofu and their fork of Terraform. They really were trying to push HashiCorp to stay open source to allow external contributions to Terraform, and they ultimately, were not able to get HashiCorp to come back to the Mozilla public license, and so that's how we got the fork of OpenTofu under the Linux Foundation in the CNCF.
Uh,
OpenBao was in a similar vein, just for a different product. So for both.
That is the beautiful part about forking is you can make it whatever you want. That's the beauty of open source, like ours to hack and own. I mean, the downside to that is that you can change licenses per release. So it puts organizations in a situation where, like, how do I know this is still going to be protected? And that's, I think, one of the biggest drawbacks to the BSL, and really any non-open source license is, what can you do with it? What can't you do with it? We don't. Somebody said recently, I don't want a lawyer in my PRs, and that's the best way to keep them out is to use those open source that is going to stay open source, community driven. So we're real thankful for your work you're doing out there.
Thank you. Work, I think that's also especially important is the work the Linux Foundation is doing to have stewardship of those open source projects and to retain some of that IP around it, so that they really can continue open source under open governance in perpetuity. So it's an important role that they play as well.
So is there any technical advantage of using OpenBao over, a closed source like Vault or a Conjure out there?
Yeah, so what we started doing over HashiCorp Vault was we started from a really reduced support base. So HashiCorp Vault had lots and lots of plugins that they supported natively. They had all these different storage backends, um, and being an open source project without much formal monetary support, we opted to only support OSI licensed integrations. So things like GCP, where you can't run, an entire cloud environment for free. That's equivalent to Google's. We sadly had to remove. And a lot of these storage backends as well, we opted to only support Raft, which is the HashiCorp supported storage backend. What that allowed us to do was start adding a lot of these core technological improvements that many of us, myself included, have been wanting for a long time out of HashiCorp. Things like paginated lists, things like relying on database transactions that just about every other application in the world has and uses every day, but just weren't present in Vault due to some of the original design decisions that they made at the time in this wide base of support. It's really hard to invent a transaction model that works across 15, 20 different storage backends because every single storage engine out there has a different sense of what a transaction is and how it works. And so that lets us, then from that play with a lot of other interesting things. So we played with scalability and improved the number of secrets engines you can have, and we're adding things like namespaces and different horizontal scalability semantics that hopefully will be easier for operators to run, because since we're entirely open source, we don't have to deal with the open core versus proprietary extension and needing to feature separate that way. So it should be exciting.
That is a real advantage if you're roadmap planning. I can tell you that.
Right.
Uh, Interoperability is the real goal, I think, of true open source. Like, you're not tied to one specific our way or the highway. And that's that going back, that's like the fear of the BSL. Like, if you do it slightly wrong, then you've done it wrong. And open source is, as long as it works, as long as you're contributing back, you're kind of doing it right. So
Thanks.
um, for folks that are currently bought in, they have vault systems and they're thinking of, well, how do I move from where I'm currently at? Is there a clean path from other vault systems into OpenBao?
Yeah, so that's one of the hardest pieces is, obviously we could only fork the open source code. We could not fork the enterprise code. And so while we are adding enterprise-like features, namespaces we hope to be entirely API compatible, maybe a little different operator experience, but things like horizontal scalability, uh, as our working group is kicking off here, will likely be completely different than what Vault Enterprise runs. And so if you are a Vault Enterprise customer, you are going to incur some sort of manual migration. And it won't just be drop in this new binary and go to town.
Oh,
Um,
we were hoping.
we were hoping. I think it would require a bit of reverse engineering, or, I am very eager to see what this IBM acquisition brings. IBM is one of the founding members of the Linux Foundation. They still retain a seat on the OpenBao TSC, and so I would love to collaborate with a lot of my close friends at HashiCorp again in the open, in the community, and maybe we can get a migration path there, or maybe we could make Vault Enterprise better. Still,
I think this is the same general problem of Vault sprawl, something that we talk to a lot of customers about over on the Git Guardian side, and something I'm having more and more conversations about and thinking about a lot, especially in the world of mergers and acquisitions out there
right?
here recently. How do you consolidate multiple vaults? It's the same problem. Like there's no clear good path. Now, if all those multiple vaults are one system, then there's a pretty clear path for that because that's interoperable, but that goes back to interoperability question. So like the dream is let's run an agent out into the world and have it run through all of our systems, all of our vaults, and then just log them and recategorize them and then rotate them once they get to the right place. But that's a magic wand thinking. And somebody out there listening to this, get on that right now, and you'll have a product on your hand before you know it.
Yeah, that's one of the aspects that I, really enjoyed most about OpenBao and Vault was it was the closest thing we had to the one standard for secrets management. It was open source, it was widely deployed, it has a lot of integrations in things like Kubernetes, CNCF projects, everything else interoperated. It itself interoperated with a lot of other things on the back end. Um, but
Now, I did. Oh,
mm,
good.
but I think we really are lacking that one open standard, something like Acme that's just dead simple to use. It's in every single language out there. Any operating environment you want a certificate in, you have an Acme client. They have Java ones, they have Go, they have shell script, they even have batch scripts for Microsoft and PowerShell as well that will connect to directories and fetch server certificates. I would love to see that type of open protocol around something like secrets management. So while you might have that sprawl today, and you will still have to do that inventory from a management side, from an application developer side, if your operators switch tooling on you under the covers, you don't care because you've written to an open common standard that everyone across the board, from CyberArk Conjur to HashiCorp Vault to AWS Secrets Manager, can all support. Uh, that'd be the dream.
So what's next? What is on the roadmap? You're on the steering committee. What is, where is it being steered? What's next for OpenBao?
Yeah, so we have a public roadmap issue that you're more than welcome to check out as well. To highlight a couple of items there, we're really looking at how we can improve the developer experience and the operator experience of running OpenBao. There is, obviously, there's some enterprise features that we're missing there. Things like namespaces that give you stronger multi-tenancy guarantees, but we're looking beyond just one-to-one compatibility and trying to add things like, can you actually do separate encryption keys for different tenants? Can you have separate storage backends with different properties? Raft is very good from a local read perspective, but it's kind of slow for writes. Maybe certain workloads of yours need different, are more write heavy, and so you want a different storage backend for that particular namespace. We're looking at adding scalability then as well. Vault Enterprise obviously has performance secondaries, which give you that ability to service read requests from any node. We'll likely do something similar in a flatter style of architecture. But then, where do we go from there? I'd really like to see us, probably 80% of our users use 20% of the functionality. Can we pare down that binary size, get a little easier to run thing, and build a proper plugin ecosystem? That's one of the things OpenTofu has done in Terraform really well was, hey, a really large community of third-party plugins. If you needed a secret for literally anything out there, there was a registry. You could find it fairly easily. And it'd be nice to build that for OpenBao as well. So
I'm glad you brought up OpenTofu. Not to dig into that whole world, but what's with the naming convention of like it's Open Tofu, Open Bao? Are we gonna have Open Noodles next? Like, what's the?
I don't know what the next one will be. I will say that Bao I think is the cutest mascot out there. Selfishly, I think I chose the right project there, and you can put tofu in front and tofu inside of Bao as well. So Um,
That's how I eat it. So
as far as I know, the author was just a little hungry when he started OpenBao and thought maybe it was time for some dim sum.
that's awesome. Well, maybe the logic is with Bao, you're never really sure what it is until you bite into it. So there's a secret in there.
Right,
Maybe,
right.
maybe
And you have
that's a little silly,
multiple
but
secrets engines, multiple BAO, and you have a plate that contains all of them. Your security boundary. I think you could extend the metaphor a fair bit, but it's a little
let's
extended.
let's go with that, and that will become canon now. This is the canon of OpenBao. You heard it from Alex himself. So for those that might have heard this, like that's something I want to get involved in. I want to get involved in OpenBao. I want to help make open source more secure. I want to help with this project. What's that process look like?
Yeah, so we have a public roadmap. You're welcome to take issues off of there. You're welcome to scratch your own itch, and if there are UX issues that you've had for a long time with Vault, we have a public RFC process. You can submit an RFC if it's a larger feature, or just a regular issue if it's something minor. Open a pull request. We tend to be fairly friendly around here, so we hope, and you're very accepting and welcoming of pull requests or issues or uh, docs changes or anything. We also have a little bit of a mentorship program. I'm considering new mentors if anyone else is interested, or sorry, new mentees if anyone else is interested. But I've been mentoring two young individuals who have done a fabulous job with some fairly complex issues, fairly complex feature design. So I think those will be landing in our next release, V230, at some point. Um, but yeah, hit us up on Matrix, on the Linux Foundation Matrix channel, or on our GitHub page if you are interested in checking us out. So
Very much for sharing about OpenBao. I did want to move on and ask you a few questions, as a security practitioner out there in the world. And the first is, what is your favorite security command line tool?
oh, the one I used for the longest time was Pass, from Jason. Um, I had built my own, like, not quite a REPL, but a set of shell aliases over the top of it, that was even more complex, I think, than Pass itself was. To try and get a good user experience there, my wife and I used it for secrets management, or for our own password management, I guess, for a long time. But lately we've switched to 1Password. But no, I really liked using Pass. It was just simple. It was command line. I could access it from any device I needed to with the SSH hop or two, and it just worked well. So
Awesome. Right. So you have obviously had many so you've had a lot of different jobs over your career, as we all have, as we travel through this journey together. Um, when you've been hired, is there a particular best interview question that you can remember being asked?
I didn't actually end up taking this job, but I really liked the interview question. Was designing a PKI system from scratch. You have components. You can choose at what level you want to go. Do you want to start from Go and build up your own CA from scratch, or do you want to take an off the shelf CA? How would you run that at a larger enterprise scale? You probably need some queuing system there. You definitely need HSMs to actually secure the key material, and do you run it in the cloud and use a cloud KMS, and maybe don't have complete ownership of the machines you run on, or do you actually spec out a hardware in an actual data center, and what are the different security risks associated with each. It was a fun thought experiment of how much detail do you want to go into. There's almost infinite detail in PKI that you can go, but it was a nice open-ended question. So
Awesome. I love open-ended questions because it really is asking how do you think more than looking for that specific bit of information. I always feel.
right, yeah, completely agree.
All right, moving on to I think everybody's favorite little part of the show, best advice, worst advice. So, what is the best security advice you can give us, or that you've heard recently?
I don't know that it's advice so much as practice. But when I was at Real World Crypto last year, I was really amazed at how much cryptography has moved on from, I don't know, 20 years ago, whenever, to, just kind of slinging protocols wherever, designing them based on gut feel, some, thinking around there, to moving into very formal, computational models of, formally verified protocol design and implementation. Things like the noise protocol were designed with formal verification in mind. But I hope one day we can push it a little outside of the cryptography space and get to more general, formally verified security models, um, as a
Right
whole,
on.
from like an application layer. That'd be really cool.
It would be.
Good.
All right. And what is the worst security advice that you've heard?
Just add more encryption. You can, just throw another level of encryption on there, but if it's not, carefully studied and, bound to things directly, yeah, you might not get as far as you had hoped. You might obfuscate it for, somebody just casually looking on the wire, but you probably open yourself up to a whole other set of attacks. And so it's better to look at those threat models very carefully. Decide what type of vectors you want to defend against, which ones are out of your control. It's one of the biggest shortcomings, I'd say, of OpenBao right now is, our threat model, our security model says, hey, if you leak the memory of the host, I mean, that's outside of our control at some point. You can defend against that, using confidential computing potentially, but it's strictly outside of our barrier of control. Um,
I mean, at some point, you can't protect the entire stack for everybody that will ever touch your stuff. So there has to be a boundary somewhere where it is a shared responsibility model. So
right.
thank you very, very much for being here. Pleasure to have you. And everybody go check out OpenBao if you're serious about open source, keeping open source licenses as you're operating, uh, as the way you operate as an organization. It's the one to go with. So thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure's all mine.